When I encountered my first boss fight in Lords of the Fallen, like I do in every other video game, I just ran up to the boss expecting to mindlessly spam my attack button until the boss died. So imagine my surprise when after my 10th death, I realized this isn't going to work. Instead, I had to take my time. I had to study the boss's attacks. I had to study the boss's attack combos. And on top of all that, I had to learn the timing of both the attacks and the dodge rolls so that I could sneak in between these attacks, get a few hits of my own in, and then roll out to avoid getting hit myself and repeat the cycle until the boss was eventually dead. So what did I learn from this? Simple. The bosses in this game cheat, the game itself is unfair, and therefore completely unplayable. Lords of the Fallen is a new Souls-like game brought to us by Hexworks. Well, I shouldn't say new. It's a new game, but it's a remake, reimagining, redo over, pretend the other one doesn't exist game being released in 2023. To sum it up simply.
Substitute indeed.
That was one shot, one opportunity, and she took it. For those who have seen my other videos, you know I like to be completely transparent and open with my audience. So 2 things I want to go over before we dive into the actual video. First, I was provided with an early access key by Hexworks for Lords of the Fallen. However, I was not paid to play the game itself, nor am I being paid or required to say anything positive or negative about the game. So everything you're hearing in this video is my genuine opinion. Secondly, I'm aware of how passionate the Souls community is. So I want to take a moment and discuss my experience with Souls games, just so you have a better perspective of where I'm coming from in this video. Before I played Lords of the Fallen, my first and only experience with the Souls-like games was Elden Ring. Elden Ring was given to me by one of my Twitch viewers last year when the game first came out. And when they bought the game for me, I told them, I was like, listen, I don't play the Souls games. I don't know if this game is really for me. So I don't want you to feel like you wasted your money if I don't end up playing too much of it. And they said, no, don't worry about it. I just wanted to give it to you, see if you'd like it. And if you don't like it, not a problem. So I said, all right. And I dove in and I played it for 112 hours straight. I was absolutely blown away by just how much love and detail had gone into that game. I was so absorbed into the combat, even when I was getting my butt absolutely stomped, especially in the beginning when I had no idea what to expect in terms of the Souls-like combat. I had seen it before, like on other Twitch streams and YouTube videos, but I had never played it myself, so I knew, like, I have to dodge things. But boy, did I quickly learn that I knew nothing. I remember walking out into the open world and seeing, I believe it was Tree Sentinel. Don't yell at me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I played it. And me just not really knowing if it was an NPC or a random enemy. I didn't know what to expect. So I walked up to it and then was dead about 2.5 seconds later. But where some people may have gotten frustrated or annoyed or angry when something like that happened in a game series that they had not played before, instead, it just made me want to learn more about it. It eventually got to the point where I was playing it both on my Twitch stream and in my own time off stream, which is not something I very often do. My Twitch stream is usually my dedicated video game time. So it's very rare for me to boot up a game at 9 o'clock at night and play it for a couple hours before I go to bed. Weirdly enough, it actually ended up becoming my game that I use to relax before bed, which I know is not something you would normally say about a Souls game, a game that is designed to challenge you. But that's kind of just what happened. I just got lost in exploring. I got lost in the combat, finding new gear, learning how to be better at the combat. I just absolutely loved it. I just wanted to be upfront about that because as I'm talking about Lords of the Fallen in this video, I may reference Elden Ring here and there, but I just want to make it very clear that in no way, shape, or form am I trying to compare Lords of the Fallen to Elden Ring. That's just the perspective that I personally am going to be coming from. Also, just a heads up, I'm sick as I'm recording this, so if it seems like I'm struggling to talk at times, that's what's going on. Oh. Whoa! Where in the blue hell did you come from? As soon as you create a new game, you're instantly going to be brought to the character creation screen for Lords of the Fallen. Some are more melee focused, where others are more about the ranged combat. And then of course there are a couple different mage-like characters as well for those who prefer the more magical approach to your game. I personally went with the Pyrrhic Cultist because the idea of throwing fire at my enemies was just simply too hot to pass up. Okay, chat, I think I'm gonna need you to help me here because I'm switching through the two bodies. I'm not really seeing the difference. Is there boobs? Which one has the boobs? Corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pictures. They're the same picture. You can also fully customize your character from their appearance, from their body, male, female, whatever you want. Unfortunately, there is one key customization option that is missing from Lords of the Fallen that has become more and more common with every other game that's coming out as of late, and that is, of course, genitalia customization. Sadly, the fantasy of finally having a large genitalia will have to wait for another game. Despite that, I spent a lot of time trying to customize the appearance of my character so that he would look as close to me as possible, and if I'm being honest, I think I got it pretty close. Lastly, I had to choose a name for my character, and I thought, what else is more appropriate than Charizard? Don't look at me like that. That hit me? What? Oh, I'm back. Don't worry about it. Just kidding. Now, I'm sure one of the big questions that you have is, how challenging is the game? And honestly, that's not really a simple question to answer. I'll talk a little bit about it now, but I'm also going to come back to it in a section later on in the video. But let's talk about the big one that everyone's probably wondering about. Boss fights. Like in Elden Ring, your bosses, you actually have to study and learn how they work in these games. You can't just run up and hit your attack button a few times while swiping on your favorite dating app or binge watching The Office for the millionth time. You actually have to focus. You have to learn how they work. You have to learn how they play, and you have to figure out when is the best time for you to attack, which is actually really fun. I enjoy that sort of stuff because when you lose in these fights, you can usually pinpoint your own error and why it was your fault. How many of us, for example, had a boss down to maybe like 1 to 2% of his health left? You're on your 15th attempt and you can feel the adrenaline building up and you're like, this is it, this is it, this is it. So you go for that extra attack down to 1%, go for that one more attack, but before you can get it in, you get hit and you die. You immediately have that moment of frustration, but then once the adrenaline kind of wears off and you calm down, you go, you know what? I knew the attack it was doing. I didn't have time to get an additional attack in, but I was greedy. I just wanted to try and finish it off right there. I should have backed out and waited for the cycle to repeat so I could come in and sneak in one more attack. I'm frustrated, but this is my fault. A lot of that stuff is still in Lords of the Fallen. You have to really pay attention and learn the bosses, which can be an exciting challenge. That sort of stuff is great and absolutely present in Lords of the Fallen. With that being said, you're not going to necessarily spend hours and hours trying to conquer one individual boss. There could be a boss here and there that stumps you. I know one of the early bosses definitely stumped me for a bit, but once I kind of got a grasp on how the combat and everything works in this game, I was getting through subsequent bosses relatively easily. Some bosses I finished in like 2 rounds. Other bosses took me 4 or 5. They weren't really mind-numbingly punishing or difficult. But for those of you who maybe do struggle with the bosses, there is a sort of, I don't know if accessibility is the right word to use here, but there is an option to summon a helper if you are struggling with the boss and just want to get through it. Now, I remember when Elden Ring came out, there was a lot of discourse around the idea of using summons. A lot of hardcore Souls players were absolutely against using summons as it takes away from the traditional Souls experience, which I completely get. I understand where they're coming from. However, I'm more of someone who believes as long as the player is doing something that was intended by the developers, aka they're not using like cheats or hacks or whatever, people are free to play the game the way they want. If someone wants to use a summon to help them fight a boss because they get more enjoyment out of that and that's how they have fun playing Lords of the Fallen, then power to you. Use all the summons. I have a friend who typically when he plays video games, he plays on easy mode. I prefer to play on normal because I feel that's the way developers intended the first playthrough to be done. But for my friend who plays on easy, he just likes to relax and casually enjoy video games. It's not what I would do, but it's what he enjoys. I used a summon on one of the first bosses just to get an idea of what they're like and how they perform in the boss fights. And honestly, it just kind of came down to almost luck, because even though I joked earlier in the video, it seems like the summons do just use the mash attack button strategy until they die super dead, which usually leads to them just dying really, really quickly. After the first boss fight though, I just wanted to learn the bosses myself, so I didn't use any of the summons in any of the boss fights later on in the game. Speaking of bosses, Lords of the Fallen does have one unique mechanic to it where a boss will actually follow you and hunt you throughout the entire game. And that boss is the camera. The camera can lead to some extremely frustrating and just all around clunky moments that will usually cause you to die when realistically it wasn't your fault. You will be trying to fight a horde of enemies and you'll go to dodge and you'll get stuck on something that you didn't even know was there. The game has a lock-on mechanic, which is meant to lock on the enemies in front of you for aiming either your melee or ranged weapons or your spells. But a lot of the times it will, instead of locking on the enemy in front of you, will lock on to an enemy way off in the corner. Or another weird thing that will happen, say an enemy is right here, you'll push the lock on button and then in the blink of an eye, the camera will pan and lock onto something that's not, there's nothing over here. It's just a wall. It just pulls you away from the enemy, faces you at nothing, and then of course you get a nice little slap in the booty butt behind you. It's one thing if this was like a now and then occurrence, but it is all the time. This is one of the things where I was talking earlier about it being challenging. The bosses are one thing, but it's the in-between segments, you know, the actual gameplay segments, where things kind of get a little frustrating, and not in the challenging, frustrating sense where you're learning and you're getting better with each time. No, it's just more frustrating. The game loves to have enemies attack you that you didn't even know existed because they're off camera. You'll be fighting someone in front of you and then out of nowhere you're getting hit by maybe some sort of wizard or archer way up above that I guess you were just supposed to know they were there. Or enemies will spawn in behind you, sneak up and hit you, and once again you were just supposed to know they were there. With as many enemies that are in this game, it just feels like the camera is the uber duper super boss that is just there to make your life miserable. I didn't know. One thing Lords of the Fallen makes very clear early on is that this game has no intention of being your friend. This game has an obsession with ambushes. If you're going around a corner, expect to be ambushed. If you're going up or down a flight of stairs, expect them to ambush you by throwing probably a barrel down the stairs at you. If you are walking along some of like the cliffside stuff, and you see there is a maybe like 100-foot railing, but in the middle of that railing there's like this tiny little gap. Yeah, there's an ambush there. Just watch out. Instead of focusing on more challenging aspects of like combat, Lords of the Fallen just feels like it tries to trick and deceive you until eventually it catches you off guard and you just die. Gone is that feeling of frustration because you messed up, but you also understand what you did wrong so you can fix it in the next encounter. And instead it's just, oh, there's gonna be a guy here who tries to push me off. Okay, so just don't let it happen this time. Haha, got it. Oh no, wait, got past that first guy, and then there was a second guy waiting to push me off as well. Got it. Yeah, I had a feeling something was gonna come out there. Okay, can you roll off, like, can you fall off the side there? Because I feel like I probably should have fallen off like 30,000 times at this point. That answers that question. Between the camera, the ambushes, and the kind of iffy map design, as someone who loves exploring in video games, Lords of the Fallen, here's this word again, just kind of made it frustrating. There's a lot of platform areas with a jumping system that doesn't seem the most user-friendly. It's kind of clunky and wonky. You can't even just jump on your own. You have to be always running before you can jump, which can make to some weird moments when you're in combat as well, trying to do these platforming sections. Wait. I'm still that was the plan all along. If you are exploring, there are little hints from the Umbral world that will somewhat guide you along. Maybe you'll see some blue butterflies off in a corner or off in a distance somewhere. Maybe your lamp will light up like a light bright to let you know that something is there that you can interact with in the Umbral world, which can make for some cool moments. But when you combine everything I've just talked about, camera, ambushes, clunky controls, clunky everything, you're probably already guessing it. Yeah, it's, as someone who loves exploring, I was just kind of frustrated. The most unique part about Lords of the Fallen is, of course, the Umbral world. The Umbral world is sort of like an alternate dimension where as you're exploring, you might come across a path that seems like it's blocked or there's no way to get across to the platform that you need to get to. But if you either use your lamp or go into the Umbral world, a new path will be revealed to you that was hidden before. At first, this is actually a really cool and unique design, and you would think it would encourage you to explore. And in a way, it does. You can find hidden little items or hidden little pathways that you could have overlooked. I definitely got stuck in one area early on because I just happened to miss the sign that I was supposed to use the Umbral world to find I think it was a ladder that I was overlooking. So it's definitely something you need to keep in mind as you are playing the game, that not everything is necessarily as it seems. When you do go into the Umbral world, your health will become withered, meaning half of your health bar will be grayed out, and the only way to fill it back up is to damage the enemies that are in the Umbral world. One thing that I was not ready for when you are using the lamp to look into the Umbral world is that enemies will ambush you. Surprising, I know. But they can either hit you from the Umbral world or they can pull you directly into it. So even if you think you've cleared out all the enemies and now it's safe to use your lamp to see if there's anything in the Umbral world you need to use or find in your given area, you might not necessarily be safe. I should probably get it. Even though that... Whoa! Okay, that scared me. That scared me. That you can't just come out of the alternate dimension when I'm not ready for you, man. That wasn't cool. The door was not open. I was just peeking through the window. There is one element to the Umbral world though that as more and more time went on, it kind of caused the novelty of it to wear off. So one element of the Umbral world is there will be like a little round meter in the top right corner of your screen. The longer you're in the Umbral world, the more that will fill up. And the more full it is, the more enemies will spawn, which seemed like a cool idea at first. What I realized is, yes, as the bar fills, more enemies will spawn in, but they also don't stop spawning in even if you're still in the same area. So the game, instead of coming up with kind of interesting and unique combat scenarios, instead just goes with mob after mob after mob after mob after mobs of enemies to throw at you all at once, to the point where it feels like you're fighting mobs of 8 to 10 different enemies at one given time. There was one moment I remember where I was on this little island and there was a flying ranged enemy that I couldn't hit with my melee attack. So I was trying to use my fire spells, but because I was in the Umbral world, the enemies just kept spawning in, so I would try to clear them out, but as I would clear them out, a whole new wave would instantly spawn, meaning I could never catch up so that I could take out the flying ranged enemy. So instead of losing because, you know, maybe I mistimed my dodge or I didn't read an attack appropriately, the reason I died is because I didn't kill the 10 enemies fast enough that spawned after the 25 that I already killed. While visually it looks really cool and I appreciated the idea of them trying to use it to encourage the player to explore and maybe find new and hidden things, because the game just relies so much on just throwing endless mobs at you, combined earlier with like the camera stuff that I was talking about, it just led to, and I don't use this word very often, a frustrating experience. Gone was the feeling that I had in Elden Ring, where I would, not even necessarily a boss, but it just would like lose to maybe like a dragon out in the wild. And it was like, oh, that's so annoying. I died, but I know exactly what I did wrong. Instead, it was just kind of punishing you, but not in a fun, challenging way. Who's that? Let's go fight him. Fidget, you have no health items. I don't care. So, should you play Lords of the Fallen? It depends. If you are experienced with the Souls-like games and have maybe already played all the other games in the genre, then I would say it can't hurt to pick it up and give it a shot, but it's not going to be as smooth or as enjoyable as some of the other games like Elden Ring in the genre. If you have not played the Souls-like games before, I wouldn't recommend you start with Lords of the Fallen. I loved that Elden Ring is my first experience in these games, but since playing it, I have been encouraged, I don't know how many times at this point, that I should play Dark Souls 3, and also I intend to check out Lies of P at some point. Both games I actually have. I have Dark Souls 3 on Steam and I have Lies of P installed through Game Pass. I just haven't gotten around to giving it a shot yet. I know the developers have worked really hard in this game, and I know they intend to adjust and patch things. Maybe they'll hear some of this criticism and they'll adjust things going forward. But as of recording this, I don't think it's a bad game by any means. There were moments where I was having a lot of fun with it, usually the boss battles specifically, but there's just a lot of frustrating things in between those boss battles that really drag the experience down. So yeah, that's my opinion on Lords of the Fallen. Thanks for watching.